Okay, so for my next project, I have this Sanyo Plus Q25 direct drive turntable, quartz locked speed, and I bought this for all of $20 complete. So it's got a dust cover with decent hinges, it's not cracked, got a platter mat which is still pliable, the chemicals haven't leached out of it. It's got a cartridge, an EDC OLN 38, which I don't actually have very much experience with. So this is the makings of a fairly decent low-end turntable for 20 bucks. First question is, does it work? And like most of these, it probably works if you move the tone arm in. And it does. Well, with the lights out, you can tell the speed is very good. Okay, so let's learn a little bit more about our turntable. And to do that, we're going to go to the website vinylengine.com. Okay, this is a great resource for all things turntables. They have manuals and reviews, all kinds of models. So I'm going to go to Sanyo Plus Q25. That's a pretty simple name. And we've got reviews of the turntable. Let's look at some reviews. You won't touch this for 10 times the price with a new turntable. It's heavy and not likely to add any vibrations. Speed is dead on. A real Sanyo sleeper from 1979. That sounds promising. But here is the manual page. So, quartz PL direct drive semi-automatic turntable, so we already knew that. Let's give some stats here. And we can download the instruction manual and the service manual by clicking these links. You have to register for an account first, which can be a bit of a pain. But once you are, you should be able to get these resources. Alright, so I've downloaded this is the actual owner's manual for the turntable. Looks familiar. I think it's out of warranty though. We look at the service manual. It has specifications as well, and all kinds of information about adjustments, which could be helpful. Though if something's truly broken, these might not really get us what we need. A very nice exploded diagram and parts list. Not that really very many of these are going to be available. Those could be helpful sometimes if you're looking for parts for a turntable and you don't know if parts from another turntable will fit. You can download the service manuals for each one and cross-reference those part numbers. Okay, the next step is to start taking it apart and cleaning things. And my favorite product for this is antibacterial wipes. They are not too wet, so they're not going to really damage the electronics. They've got enough cleaning power to clean up some of the grime. So this is a good place to start. So that's cleaned up rather nicely just with the antibacterial wipes. It is all plastic with some wood grain appearance on it. It's really attractive. Some of the chrome is pitted, even though it's plastic, but it's cleaned up pretty well. So this is a direct drive turntable, so the platter is removed by pulling it straight up. Just grab here a yank and it will pop right up. So we look underneath, here's the automatic mechanism, and you can tell this is a semi-automatic, so it's an automatic stop, but manual start. So we'll see how that's working in a bit, but all the pieces are here, which is pretty amazing. Up rather well just using the antibacterial wipes, including the feet. Now the rubber on some of these is not that great. It's not very pliable anymore, so we might need to look at that. Often the most valuable and unobtainable part of a vintage turntable is the dust cover. And this not only has a dust cover, but it's in very good condition. So I've gone over the dust cover with a antibacterial wipe, and it's already looking really pretty good. Get all the chunky stuff off. So to start cleaning it more thoroughly, really the best thing to use is Windex. It's not going to hurt the plastic. So Windex and a microfiber cloth, and it should be looking pretty good. This turntable does have a removable head shell. This is the common type that was used on turntables, cheap ones, in the 70s and 80s. It's not as common as a Techniques standard style, but you can obtain replacements of these, and they are removable, so it's easy to work on your cartridge and stylus with mounting it, and also easy to replace it and have multiple cartridges if you see fit. So just loosen this screw here and it should pull right out. It has pulled right out, as you can see. So again, this is an ADC QLN38. Now ADC went out of business a long time ago, but it's possible probably to get an aftermarket stylus from this from a company like Fansteel or Kiowa, Turntable Needles, LP Gear, some sources. So don't know much about this cartridge. I've used a lot of vintage cartridges from Shure and Audio-Technica, Stanton for sure. Don't know much about ADC though. I've never had one of them, so we'll research this a little bit. And also it looks like that's maybe not sitting in there very well, so it's probably best to just replace the whole cartridge, but I'd be very surprised if this stylus hadn't had it. Alright, so I've removed the platter again, and this is a nice heavy platter for a turntable that's this inexpensive. So now we're going to figure out whether the automatic mechanism works or not. And when you look at this, it doesn't seem to have a whole lot of dirt on it, which is great, or dried up grease, which is also great. You don't want to put a whole lot of grease or lubricant on it. More is not necessarily better. So when we open it up, we'll see what needs to be cleaned out, but we don't want to overdo it. To access the innards of this turntable, we're going to go in from the bottom by removing the bottom. So I've already removed the adjustable feet. These are kind of thin, but they work, and we've got these screws around the edges. It's been a while since I've seen a turntable, at least a decent one, that had a fiberboard bottom, but so be it. So we're going to take it apart and see what's going on. And the turntable is upside down, and a lot of people say you should put the dust cover on and put it on top of the dust cover. And I think that's a bad idea, because again, the dust cover is one of the most valuable and breakable parts of this turntable. So what I do on my workbench is I put 2 bricks like this, put some nice soft cloths on them, and then put it upside down, making sure that the tone arm, nothing else important, is contacting them. So it's completely suspended, just like you had your car up on a lift. Now you definitely have to take the platter off, because otherwise it'll probably fall off. But this is going to be useful. And also when you flip it over, you might need to make some adjustments from the bottom, and sometimes you can get to them while the turntable's running with it up on its little lift here. Don't take out any more screws than you have to. So I was able to remove the 9 screws from around the perimeter of the fiberboard base. It is now loose. Let's see what we have inside. All right. And we see the underside of the cam that operates the automatic mechanism. And you can see there is some grease under here. There's a channel. There's a little nub that rides in that. And this grease is pretty dried up and gooey, so that is worth cleaning up. So we saw that the motor was actually turning at a perfect speed earlier, but while we're in here, we might as well take a look at it. So I took out these 3 screws here and took the wires out of the clipper to give it some clearance and lifted it up, and the motor has come apart. So I cleaned both the shaft of the motor and the inside of the motor with some Q-tips. Did not use a solvent, just use the Q-tips. Make sure you don't get any fuzz in there. and there was some kind of gooey oil in there. This definitely seems like it's worth doing. I'm going to give it a little bit more cleaning, and then we'll re-lubricate it. Okay, that's nice and clean. It's ready for re-lubrication, but you don't want to use just any kind of oil. Okay, so this is 3-in-1 oil, but not just the regular kind. You can see it's specifically motor oil, not motor oil like your car, but for an electric motor. So some people say you can use sewing machine oil. Certainly Techniques will sell you a tiny vial of their special oil that's probably just the same as this, but this seems to work well. Again, you don't want to use too much, so you want to put some in the hole. Incidentally, sometimes there is a ball bearing that the shaft rides on at the bottom of the hole, which can come out when the motor is turned upside down. This one doesn't seem to have that, so that's okay. I'm also going to put some oil on the shaft of the motor and then reinsert it. Again, more is not necessarily better here. In some cases may be too much, so you can see that this is not really going down. So it's a very machine of very tight tolerances, and the oil is preventing it from going down. So I'm holding it down here. Now it seems okay. It seems to have gone all the way down. You also just wait for the weight of it to pull it down, or maybe you put in too much oil. But I'm going to spin this. That feels really, really nice for a turntable of this age. So I'm going to put the motor back in and then turn my attention to the rest of it. Okay, that was really dumb. So in my haste to make this exciting video, I forgot to unplug the turntable when I flipped it over. And as I was moving the mechanism here to clean it, which worked pretty well, it activated and turned on the motor, and then there was a puff of smoke which came out of this, which is the underside of the light bulb for the quartz strobe. So, I'm going to clean these parts now, and actually a good solvent to use, not a good lubricant, but a good solvent, is WD-40. It won't hurt the plastic, it dissolves the goo very well, cleans up well, doesn't leave too much of a residue, so I think it really works well for that purpose, although again, that's not what you want to use for permanent lubrication. Okay, so I've cleaned that up pretty well, and again, it was primarily the underside of this cam, this sliding surface, and this sliding surface here. So I could take more of it apart, but since it worked so well to begin with, I think less is more. So before I re-lubricate it, I'm going to let the WD-40 sort of evaporate a bit. Okay, and what do you re-lubricate it with? Well, in my experience, most turntables have one of two types of grease, either a yellowish grease, which was what was on all of this stuff, or a black grease. The yellow grease seems to be used on plastic, and the black grease seems to be metal on metal or plastic on metal. So this is Superlube multi-purpose synthetic grease. So this is my substitute for the yellow or clear grease. Okay, it's dielectric, so it means it won't conduct electricity, which is good. And my replacement for the black grease is this Tamiya molybdenum grease. This is intended for use in radio-controlled cars, so with very fine gears. So turntables seem to use both of these types of grease, so I didn't find any of this, but the yellowish grease, I'm going to use the Superlube for that. So with the help of a Q-tip and a toothpick, I applied some of that Superlube grease to those plastic parts, reinstalled the motor, flipped it back over, and see there's an instruction here about getting the cam in the right place before you put the platter back on. So this is correct. So there's a notch with no teeth on it in this gear. You want to make sure that is what is against here, so you can see that the motor is turning freely now. I'm going to put the plier back on and see if I killed the turntable. Okay, I've plugged it back in. The bottom is still off the turntable in case you need to get back in there. And the moment of truth, is this going to work? Oh good, it still turns. But it looks like I killed the bulb. So it could be worse, but that's not good. That's an own goal. That's on me. I feel really stupid making it worse rather than better, but let's take out these two screws here and see if this bulb is replaceable. Okay, remember that service manual I said we probably weren't going to need? Well, here we go. So we have our exploded diagram here. So right here is what we're looking at. So if we go down to here, we can see is this assembly right here, and the business part looks like part number 72. So here we go, 72, D4 through 6, those are diodes. Part numbers, this is the part number of the reflector and the PC board assembly. So LED SLR53 URCS red, and there are 3 of them. Right, so if we look, certainly 2 of these LEDs do not look good. The third one, maybe, maybe not. But I'm going to unsolder these and then test them. Okay, so LEDs have a polarity, a positive and negative. I'm going to make sure we know which is the positive and which is the negative side of the LED when we remove it. So one way to test if an LED is good is if you have a multimeter with a diode test function like this one right here. So this is an LED that I know to be good, and LEDs have 2 leads on them, a positive and a negative. The positive is called the anode, the negative is called the cathode. On a new LED like this one, the anode, the positive side, is the longer of the 2. And also if you look at the LED itself, the positive or anode side does not look like a flag, and the negative or cathode side has this sort of flag type thing. So that's a way to tell, even if it's already been shortened, the leads. So if we put the positive side on the meter on the anode side and the negative side on the cathode side, the LED should light up, and it does. So we know that this one is good. So this is one of the ones, this is actually the best looking one that I took out of the turntable and to test it, and it is not lighting up, so it is bad. So we're going to replace all 3 of those. So the irony of this is that when this turntable was made, there only were red LEDs, and they were probably relatively expensive. Well, white LEDs did not yet exist, or blue, or any other colors, and now they're a dime a dozen. So I had to buy some red LEDs, and one of the cheapest ways to do it was to buy a kit of 240 LEDs. I only need 3 red ones, so I'll have 237 left. But it's this assortment of different sizes and colors, so hopefully I can use them for other projects, and this was only about $10. So these are what are called 5mm LEDs, because as you can see, the width of it is about 5mm. So I've desoldered the old LEDs, resoldered the new ones in, correct way around, put it all back together, and this is the moment of truth. Does it light up? It does. It's fixed. Okay, we've got the turntable back on its own 4 feet, screwed the bottom back on, and everything seems to be working perfectly. And it doesn't actually sound too bad with the original cartridge and stylus. But I think after considering all the factors, I really should replace the cartridge on this. Again, ADC cartridges, the replacement style life for them are supposedly not that great. I wouldn't want the next owner of this not to be able to get a stylus that would fit the turntable well. So I'm going to look into some alternatives. So this is what's called a low mass tone arm. So these were popular in the 70s and 80s. I had a dual turntable with a low mass tone arm, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It's not very heavy. So the idea is that with a low mass tone arm, you also have to use a low mass cartridge. So not every cartridge is going to work equally well for this turntable. In fact, the range of adjustment in terms of weight and anti-skate is relatively limited on this. So let's look at what some of the alternatives are. So I've removed the cartridge from the head shell, and just to show you what I mean about weight being important with a low mass tone arm, these screws are actually made of plastic for lightweight. They're non-metallic, and you can get steel screws, aluminum, or again in this case plastic, and it actually does make a difference. I actually had a Denon turntable with a low mass tone arm, and the weight of the screws actually made a difference in terms of whether I could balance the cartridge or not. So let's see what this cartridge weighs. So we have our scale here, and the original cartridge, complete, weighs in at 5 grams, which is very light by today's standards. So one alternative cartridge that I might consider is a Stanton 500. So I bought a lot, meaning a group of, but also a quantity of Stanton cartridges. So I have a few of them. This is actually a Pickering PATE1, which is the same as the Stanton 500, which with a different name. And with its stylus on it, it weighs maybe a little bit less, maybe 4 grams. So this would probably be a good match as well. So some other options would be an Audio-Technica 3600L. So this one is already mounted on a head shell. So this is about 5.7 grams, I believe. And here we have a brand new Ortofon Omega 1E. This is very similar to their OM line of cartridges, which are designed for low mass tone arms. So my first turntable was dual in the 1980s, and it had a very similar Ortofon cartridge to this. And this weighs in at just almost 5 grams here. Now compare that to a modern, although this is a brand new cartridge, a modern Ortofon 2M. So the 2M red weighs in at 7.2 grams. So that's a huge difference. So I've decided to go with the Stanton for this particular turntable. One reason is that even though these cartridges are out of production, there is a very good quality replacement stylus that's still available. This is an elliptical that performs very comparably to an original equipment one, which is not necessarily the case for every cartridge that's out there, such as that ADC. So I'm going to mount it loosely in the head shell and then show how to hook everything up and align it. So I have a wide assortment of screws, but I don't want to use ones that are too long, so I don't want it to contact the cartridge body, which has actually been done on this one before. So just long enough, and again, the smaller they are, also the lighter they are. So there's different ways of aligning a cartridge, but with this cartridge protractor, there are 2 null points here and here. So what you do is you put the stylus tip on the target. It's easier to see with this one here, on the target. And if the cartridge is rectangular, the front and the sides of it should line up and be parallel to these lines, and the stylus should go straight back along that middle line. So if we look at this here, that's pretty far off. So through a process of trial and error, by both rotating the cartridge and moving it fore and aft, you want to get it so it will line up perfectly on both of these targets. The tip of the stylus goes right on that target, and the cantilever should line up straight along that parallel line. And if the cartridge is relatively rectangular, it should line up along the front side and along the edges. And if I move it to the outer null point, which is actually harder to align, this also looks pretty good. So I'm pretty pleased with that alignment. So we got the cartridge aligned, the screws tightened up, and now we're going to hook up the wires to the cartridge. So some cartridges like this one are actually labeled. Many are not, so you have to look at the directions for each cartridge, and they're different for different manufacturers. So red is the right channel positive. Blue is the right channel negative. White is the left channel positive, and green is the left channel negative. So you can see the red and the blue are on one side, and the white and the green are on the other side. So I'm going to hook up those wires right now. If you can do it with your fingers, that's great. If you use a pair of pliers, don't grab the round part of it here, rather back here, not the wire itself, but where the crimp is, to use a small pair of needle nose pliers to hook it up. Okay, now with everything connected up, we're going to set the vertical tracking force of the cartridge. So there's all kinds of instructions in the manual about balancing the tone arm and then adjusting the knob, but none of that is necessary if you have one of these stylus scales. So this is very cheap, less than $20, and it's well worth it. So I'm going to move the arm over and put it onto the scale, and we're registering 1.11 grams. This particular cartridge the stylus of the cartridge wants 1.5 grams. So right now it doesn't really matter what the scale on this says, but to make it heavier, you're going to turn this clockwise to move the weight closer to the stylus, and to make it lighter, you're going to move it further away. So I'm going to turn it clockwise a little bit and see if we can get it to balance. Okay, the scale says exactly 1.5 grams. And if we go and look at here, it does not say 1.5 grams. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the inner ring, without turning the silver part, turn the inner ring, so it now says 1.5. So this scale is now going to be approximately correct with this cartridge. If you were to put a different cartridge head shell on, you'd have to recalibrate that. And we're still just about good here. So now it's time for the anti-skate, which is partially based on voodoo and other personal beliefs about how to set this properly. So anti-skate is necessary because as the stylus moves toward the center of the record, friction puts more pressure on the left side of the stylus than on the right side. So that's going to overemphasize the left channel and leave the right channel distorted. So what anti-skate does is it applies a force to the arm, pushing it this way as it moves across the record. So this is approximate, but most turntables like this one have a knob here to adjust the anti-skating. So this is a special test record. So you need to have the turntable on. I'm going to move the stylus over this band in the middle where you can see it's shiny and there are no grooves. So the idea is, and there are many different theories about this, that if the stylus, if the arm remains stationary in that groove, that it will, the anti-skate is set correctly. So I'm going to put it down. You see it quickly move toward the center of the record, so that means it needs more anti-skate. I'm going to turn this and turn it up to about 1.5. Go back to here, set it back down. That's pretty close. So it's staying right there in the middle of that smooth band without moving to the left or the right. So that's probably pretty close. So finally, the moment of truth to listen to a real record with our new setup. And you can't hear that, but that sounds terrific. Sounds much better than the previous cartridge. There's less hum, so that's usually has to do with the wiring of the head shell. So that is really a good result. So one more check I like to do is I've got a actual real stethoscope here. I'm going to put it on the deck of the turntable while it's running with the arm up and see what I hear in terms of motor noise. And I hear almost nothing, which is what I should hear. So I'm really pleased with how that's turned out. This is a really well-made classic Japanese turntable, even though it's all plastic, or almost all plastic. What they've done with that plastic is pretty impressive. It sounds great, and it's 45 years old right now, and far superior to a lot of newer turntables that you could buy today, and hopefully has many years left in it.